if you don't mind. Welcome, Andrea Hollander.
Thank you, Dale. And thank you, Sherry Levine, for creating this wonderful opportunity monthly. I still hear some background noise from somebody's computer. So somebody hasn't muted. I think, Dale, that you can mute people. So maybe you need to help by muting them if you can find them.
Dale Hope is unmuted.
Hope, would you please mute yourself? I can't do it. I think because of the
Dan and
kerfuffle.
Stan also.
Well, if you can see who's not muted, that would be very helpful.
I'll try.
I mean, whoever it is that's been telling you, that would be great. So I don't want to belabor any of that, but I just wanted to thank you, Dale and Sherry, for inviting Paulann and me. Perhaps we could have done this indoors, but that would have meant that some of the people who are here now wouldn't be able to be here. So I'm going to read 6 poems, all of them from my next book. Not one of them from anything that was already collected in a book. And I will just talk a little bit about each poem before or after I read it. After reading that empathy cannot be learned, I believed I could imagine how my father felt when he told me outside my mother's hospital room that this was the worst day of his life. Either you had empathy or you didn't, the book said, and I wondered if I did. I wasn't to confuse it with sympathy. When you felt sympathy, you recognized suffering, but were outside it. Empathy took you inside someone else's feelings through your imagination, as if those feelings were your own. My father was saying words in that colorless way he sometimes did, as if meaning had escaped him. He had not said she was dead, and it didn't occur to me that she could be. Maybe you can't feel empathy until the loss is your own. I'd read the poem by Dylan Thomas that ends, "After the first death, there is no other." And no one I loved had died. Every day after work, I'd come here to see her. Once in her hospital bathroom, I tried on a new dress with a low-cut back, twirling for her the way I did at home when she made all my dresses on her singer. A nurse entered, catching me mid-twirl, glanced at my mother, glared at me, and on her way out made that sound with her tongue that meant she disapproved and wanted me to know it. "Don't worry about her," my mother said after she left. I can't describe even now what I felt for my mother. Mother love, it could be called, or daughter love, which the book didn't even mention.
This is Andrea.
She and I were in this together, whatever this was. Now I stood outside her hospital room with my father on the worst day of his life. I opened the door and went in. It became mine. I'm still hearing some background noise from somebody. I don't know who it is, but if you can't mute your screen, if you're on a phone, see if there's a way you can mute yourself on your phone. Thank you.
It's Ken. He needs to mute.
Thank you for telling us. Okay, this next poem, I don't think I need to say anything that isn't already in the poem, so I'll just read it. Sand This is how I see her now, 22 and wearing a blue bathing suit, her first two-piece, but not yet a bikini, and walking an empty beach in late afternoon, tossing a chunk of driftwood to her dog, big and gray, who galumphs back each time, clumps of wet sand flying, the dog soaked, dripping, sometimes dragging a tangle of dark green kelp he drops at her feet, the stick forgotten. And she laughs at the sight of him. And this goes on until they both tire, and she finds a place among the dunes to lie down, the dog panting at first beside her, then quieting, the steady rhythm of the ocean calming, until the dark cloud of a man hovers above them. And if not for the dog, the rest of this poem would consist of details you would not want to read. Words like straddle and thrust, crush and split, if I dared write about it. And although later she finds sand in the grooves of her sandals, and even after a shower, more between her toes and in her scalp, thanks to her dog, now decades dead, sand is still a word she can love. If you live in Portland and you're a poetry lover, you probably know John Brehm or know his poems. And even if you don't live in Portland, you probably know his poems. If you know me, I've shared them with you. So the John in this next poem is John Brehm. Puzzle. My friend John wants me to stop writing divorce poems. I've tried, I tell him, but can't, and I'm puzzled. It's been years since the divorce, and I'm sure I've moved on. He asks what I want from these poems, why I think I'm still writing them. I want to be done writing them, I tell him. But sometimes I remember one of my ex's myriad duplicities, each like an almost identical piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle, depicting a black hole, or a single panel of one of Rauschenberg's white paintings, which in this analogy might be titled The 35-Year Deception. Each lie, not the same lie. Each piece a woman he met through an app or an ad, online or inline in Walmart, Walgreens, even the Home Depot. One in her 20s took him for $2,000 and kept stringing him along, but never finally slept with him. My ex told me this, I tell John, as if that fact could erase what he did, and kept doing. During his confession, he couldn't remember which woman was which and kept correcting himself the way one might try to position and reposition the same puzzle piece into a place that looks exactly right, but isn't. I know enough should be enough. And I want this to be my last poem about that man. It's rare that I think about him, I say. So why, and now I'm really talking to myself, does he appear in a poem I'm writing about something else? One thing's for sure, puzzles have always intrigued me, so I don't give up. I never gave up even on the Jackson Pollock that overtook our dining table for months. And I didn't give up on the Milky Way, so large we finally moved it to the garage where we laid it with care on a workbench, not much in use. That same year, I tell John, I sent a snapshot to a company that offered to make an enlargement into a jigsaw puzzle. The three of us posed together one winter in red matching woolen hats, snow whitening the rooftop of our house behind us, the sky solid and blue above it, a Norman Rockwell. After our son fit his father's blue eyes into his father's face, he wanted us to frame and hang it above the piano, but we never did. And it stayed on one side of the dining table till mid-February, which still puzzles me, a woman who almost obsessively gets things done without much delay. Each time I walked past it, I saw what appeared at first to be a perfect family, but up close revealed the fine jigsawed lines and odd shapes that pay no regard to content. Our faces, crazed like pieces of expensive porcelain, are like the faces in paintings by old Dutch masters, subtleties of expression and the truths behind them obscured over time by varnish that darkens and discolors even the snow. I don't have a good reason, I finally tell John, hoping he'll see what I am beginning to accept when I sit down to write. Like my philandering ex, a poem will, no matter the consequence or cost, and without any consideration of me, go wherever it wants, whenever it wants, to satisfy its desires. Thank you. And I see that John Brim is here. So welcome, John. The next very short poem after that very long one is an aubade. And in case you don't remember what an aubade is, in poetry, it's a poem about lovers separating at dawn after having spent the night together. And it's usually in the voice of one lover addressing the other. Aubade in late September. You are not in my bed, where the sheets are calm this morning and green. All night the fleeing moon lit particles of dust. I touch the pillow where your head should be. You never left. How could you leave? You've not yet come, the man I have not met. You haven't come.
Right.
How could you leave? You never left. All night the fleeing moon. This morning too much green. The sheets too calm, and you not in my bed. You may have heard a lot of repeated lines there, and this is a poem that's a palindrome where the first and last lines are the same, the second and the penultimate lines are the same, and so on till you get to the middle, and then it spreads out again. If you've never tried it and you're a poet, you might enjoy that exercise. I have two more poems. This next one I wrote about a year, a little more than a year after the lockdown. So it was written in April 2021, and I think there's nothing else you need to know that isn't already in the poem. Along the Willamette. At the river's edge, some kind of grassy plant I can't identify, and detritus I can. Two blue, almost collapsed helium balloons and a silver one, a foot or so above the water, fighting to get away. Its birthday message in red block letters for someone named Kate. Their strings tangled together in the river. All year during COVID, I'd stayed away. But this morning, the air sweet and cool, I wandered the 6 blocks to the river, wanting an hour of my old life back, my routine of walking the wide path, maybe a few gulls, persistent pigeons, early morning runners, people on bikes. Everything I asked for is here. And now the sun, held back by fat white clouds when I left my apartment, breaks through, lighting the water. Almost on cue, 5 kayaks paddle by, causing a rush of waves to knock and knock against the bank, releasing the silver balloon, which rises into the bluing sky. And a dozen geese in that familiar V I've missed, their long black necks stretched into exclamation marks above it, honk, almost in unison, as if to celebrate. Happy birthday, Kate, I say, happy myself not to be anywhere else. Thank you. And the last poem, again, I don't think you need any introduction. The title is jammed into the first line, so you'll hear the whole first sentence as I keep going. And thank you for being here and for all the patience you have shown in getting yourselves here. Thanks to the correction made by a team led by Dale. I heard the crows before I saw them flash past my window toward the giant elm in front of my building. Then I heard the traffic slow before it stopped at the light. Ebb and flow, I thought, ebb and flow. I take so much for granted, like calling this building mine, this street mine. I even think my elm, my crows. Now I hear pellets of hail hammering the lids of the trash bins in the alley, and I know why the crows were in such a hurry. They're harbingers. They know when to take cover, when to fly. Listening to the hail reminds me of my father, who taught me to imagine the worst outcome and prepare for it. If nothing bad happens, be happy. If something does, well, at least you know what to do. I tried living like that, and it ruined me. Never fully savoring all the good I had, always expecting the good would end. I get up and stand at the window. The hail has softened into snow, each flake slow enough to be visible. So much to do, but I'm still here watching as if nothing else matters. Each beautiful flake like a kept promise I didn't believe would be kept. Snow promises nothing, therefore nothing to expect, but nothing to fear either. Already it has begun to calm the afternoon. When it thickens, snow brings silence, its whiteness covering every mistake. Even the divorce now seems a small thing, layers of snow between me and that other me. Everything quiet, even there. I'm clean again. We are all clean. And I'm standing at my window on a suddenly wintry late November afternoon in silence, looking through it. So much snow, I hear only the tinnitus I've gotten used to, another kind of snow. Real snow is coming down faster now. The flakes smaller and they're sticking. I've got that starting over feeling you get the night before school begins. And the cars are moving too, but very slowly. We're not used to driving in snow here. The tops of the cars are covered with wigs of snow, powdered wigs like courtroom barristers in British films. Car after car, they've got me smiling, giggling. I'm laughing out loud. I'm laughing the way the elm must be laughing, all those crows tickling its branches. Maybe the crows are laughing too. I can't see them through all this snow. Maybe they're wearing snow caps and epaulets of snow. Maybe they'll stay a little longer, my crows, huddled together in my tree. Ebb and flow, ebb and flow. This snow so beautiful, I have nowhere to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was lovely. I'm going to introduce you again because I'm not sure that everybody who's here heard the introduction. Andrea, you were listening to the wonderful poetry of Andrea Hollander. Andrea is the author of 5 full-length poetry collections and 3 chapbooks, as well as the winner of 2 National Endowment for the Arts fellowships, 2 Pushcart prizes, and many other honors and awards. Her work is widely published, including a feature in the New York Times Magazine. After moving to Portland in 2011, she taught for both Mountain Writers and The Attic, but after suffering a back injury, she established the Ambassador Writing Seminars, which she taught in her home until COVID, when she switched to Zoom. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
If you are just joining, would you please mute yourself? I noticed that some people just started. Also, if you're on a phone and on your computer, it gets very confusing for me to see who's who. And please don't have both on at the same time. Thank you so much. And let's see. Now I'd like to introduce our second poet of the evening, Paulann Petersen. Paulann is Oregon Poet Laureate Emerita, has written 7 full-length books of poetry, most recently One Small Sun from Salmon Poetry in Ireland. A Stegner Fellow at Stanford University, she received the 2006 Holbrook Award from Oregon Literary Arts. In 2013, she was Willamette Writers' Distinguished Northwest Writer. The Latvian composer Erik Essenvalds chose a poem from her book, The Voluptuary, as the lyric for a choral composition that is now part of the repertoire of the choir at Trinity College, Cambridge. Welcome, Paulann.
Thank you. Do you have sound from me? I think I unmuted
hear you.
myself. Okay. Well, my thanks to each and every one of you who headed for the Zoom hills tonight to join Dale and Andrea and me. And I realized that that climb to the Zoom hills was a little more difficult tonight than it usually is. So I'm doubly appreciative of everyone who is here. It's what great good fortune to be in your company tonight. And my thanks to Sherry Levine for founding this series, to Dale Champlin for continuing it, and to Andrea for letting me be her poetry sidekick tonight. I'm going to read a few poems from a new manuscript that Salmon Poetry of Ireland intends to publish in March of this coming year. Many of these poems are spoken from, they speak of, they speak to the natural world. Our Southwest Portland home backs into a small urban forest, huge Doug firs, cedars, big leaf maples, a dense treescape that's habitat for many birds, including barred owls. Inhabited. A big leaf maple imprints the pronged shape, the vein tracery of its deciduous leaf children into my eyes. 2 barred owls call back and forth, posing a question off to my left, its answer far to my right. A sister who echoes my aging bones, the wind-swaled fir first moans, then creaks. What to do? but invite them all to come and live here inside me. I taste tannin, smell resin in each outlet breath. My inner ear rings with the tongue of raptors. Since I was in grade school, that would be Richmond Grade School here in Portland, I've been taken with the notion of a totem pole's images conveying a clan's connections to the animal world. If my people had totems, my pole would include a wolf, to be the sibling I never had, a rough-furred sister keening songs into my ear. A hummingbird, because inside a tiny cotton-lined box, I keep the still perfect yet perfectly still body of a hummer who long ago flew into a window pane. Tiny dollop of gleam, almost weightless drop of stopped iridescence. She lies within her cardboard casket that once held a piece of jewelry. This little bijou laid out on white. A swan to remind me, ever the ugly duckling, of what I did not, will never become. A sea cow, because one took me in, eye to eye, through an aquarium's thick glass. Me in murky air, her underwater. For whole minutes, she, of the gorgeous name Manatee, gave haven to my gaze while she nibbled her lunch. With broad whiskered lips, she pulled apart and ate the whole loosely bound head of lettuce, leaf by swaying green leaf. A magpie, to show me another way to sing. Her trickster beak wide open, she swallows the sun whole. This next poem depends on its epigraph, and that epigraph is from Anais Nin. Anais Nin says, "Surely our parents give birth to us twice. The second time when we die, when they die. Surely our parents give birth to us twice. The second time when they die. The world after. My second birth comes parceled out in two halves. First, my father. His death reaches me on an early March morning. A phone call. His suffering finished, done. What to do but partly start over with only half the parents I've had my whole life. Try to begin anew with the still living one. 7 more years go by. I sit beside my mother's self-made wooden by Alzheimer's. I hear her last breath, ragged intake, soft release. In November cold, the second half of my second birth is done. Me, fully delivered once more. In this afterward world, I stand alone, too new, too raw, even to fill my lungs and let loose a first cry. My parents, Grace and Paul Whitman. Yes, my name for the first quarter of my so far life, Paulann Whitman. And yes, I gratefully include Walt Whitman in my Whitman family. In Specimen Days, a collection of his prose, Walt Whitman says that on a trip he took west, wherever he went westward, he saw masses of coreopsis. He saw masses of them blooming at the sides of the roads. Coreopsis, that's a very vigorous plant covered with daisy-like brilliant yellow flowers, very easy to grow. Unlike what the horticulturists call cultivars, cultivars being those delicate plants that need much special care. There's an allusion in this poem I'm going to read here in a minute, an allusion to something that Walt Whitman says in one of his poems. In that poem, Whitman refers to himself as cheapest, nearest, easiest. And in this poem, my poem, I speak directly to the coreopsis. You, coreopsis. Whitman's boast, his avowed flower of furtherance. You are short-lived, the cultivators say, but no cultivar. Cheapest, nearest, easiest. Like the poet himself, you go and grow wild where you can. Most call you tickweed. Your seeds crazy to beggar themselves when they can hitch a ride on fur or feather or cuff. Whitman takes bumptious pains to tell me you bloomed ahead of him, blazing his pathway wherever his travels took him west. But can I take him, the new world braggart, at his word? Yes. An oriole heartbeat thrummed in C sharp, a hillock sunburned thigh. You are lime and molasses, bottom heavy in my breath, a nip of anise and yellow musk. Brazen, unfurled, you beckon to me, unspooling your blooms, making for me a far and fire-bright road. A way to resist you? No. Cheap and nearly too easy, I follow. One section in my forthcoming book contains a number of other kind of personification poems, poems in which a non-human creature is either personified or speaks, or human creatures speak too. Here's one in which moths speak. And a note, moths and butterflies are in the same family, but moths preceded butterflies. Moths are much more ancient. And as you most likely already know, moths navigate by the moon. That's why a porch light is so confounding to moths. Moths have their say. For millions of years, our mother, the moon, was enough for our whole family. We found our way by first finding her place in the vast night air. We hid by day, asleep on leafy undersides. Of fur-bearing clans, we were the oldest and most small. Painted with huge eyes, our wings sometimes carried color, mostly not. Our antennas mimed the fronds of tiny ferns. Whose upstart idea was it to break away, to doze at night, to navigate by that hot lamp in the sky, to take on every lurid color under its rays? Butterflies, that's who. A branch of our family grown far astray. Cinnabar, anther, emperor gum, white witch, atlas, great owlet, death's head, we moths came first. Except for some light our moon borrows each night, we can take or leave that show off, the sun. This next poem has what I call a hard at work title, a title that kind of escorts you right into the poem. Had the matriarch been born a bat, she'd grow umbrella spine fingers long as her whole body. What she'd need to carry those almost transparent membranes of her huge furless wings. She'd give birth while dangling from her toes. A daughter, a son would clamber out of her like fonts bubbling from their source. Hanging upside down, she'd nurse those babies, her milk letting up, its heavy cream rising. She'd spread her wings across each doorway's lintel, becoming the threshold keeper. Staying her hairy tongue from idle click chat. She'd save its length for drinks of nectar, plunges into night's deep bloom. Ages passed before earth and sky wrenched apart from each other, before light even made its entry, while night still swaggered and held sway. Her ancestors would have been the only ones who could always find their way. And here's another poem with a hard at work title. And this poem explains a natural phenomenon. That natural phenomenon being sun flares. How the sun gets those flares. Before you can hear any of this, you must first understand. The sun is female. Sun woman is her name. And that does not make, by default, the moon a man. No. In fact, the sun and moon are half sisters. Easy to see that. True enough, many stars are male. Most, in fact. But they're so far away from her, they don't really count. And Sun Woman isn't much interested in them anyway. Some time ago, she took a female lover, one who waits for her on the nether side. Each late afternoon, the sun inches down toward the horizon, nonchalant, as if she's merely listing westward. Once she touches the horizon line, she slips under, quiet-like. In minutes, she's gone. Any fool knows what happens next. She and her lover go at each other red hot, crazy. How could she possibly return at dawn unchanged? Good thing we can't watch what they're up to. We'd stare ourselves blind. When I lived on a small acreage, 1¼ acres outside of Klamath Falls, I lived on land that was once ancient lake bed, lovely sandy soil, enriched with truckloads of manure. That land gave my family a huge, lush vegetable and flower garden each year. The gardener learns to live underwater by planting seeds in sandy soil that once was a wide lake's bottom, ancient lake that swallowed life after life while its wind-riven waves ate at a shoreline. By feeling the weight of long ago water pressing on her back as she leans into her garden work. By using her index finger to jab each seed downward, by scissoring that finger and her thumb to coax loose loam into making the just created holes disappear. Creatures, surely countless, drowned in that lake, then sank to its bottom, coming to rest on the very spot where her garden stands. Their deaths make the particulate of the soil. Each seed she plants takes a water weight with it, pulls a lake's ghost into the earth. Each lies only fractions deep, but enough to take hold in a darkness made from drowning. The seed drinks up the heft of 1,000 griefs. Its first leaf, looking nothing like the leaves to follow, sings uncountable songs. She watches as, from a water grave, one small hook of new green life rises. This poem claims that lilies came to us from a goddess. Now, who in the world would dispute that? No one I know. Lily. Drops flung from a goddess's breast formed the Milky Way, a strew of countless creamy stars. A few escaped the sky's reach, falling into our world, where each touched down, it bloomed. These white stars learn to call our realm their home. Fallen to earth milk, they ooze perfume, sweet and thick. An incense stolen from the sky's alchemist of scent. I began with a poem that name some of the trees who are my nearest neighbors. And I'll end with a poem about those trees, a poem for those trees. Residents. Near their limb brush, their scruff and litter, their warping bark. Under their shade, their aphid drip, their crow hostel. Close to the squirrel sway, resin liquor, chartreuse light. Not far from their wind moan, snow sag, sky model. At the edge of their rain routing. I live in the green shrine of trees. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Paulann. What a wonderful evening. This has just been incredible. Thank you both. And I just, oh my goodness. I want to cry. It was so great. We are now going to be open for an open mic. And hopefully none of us will be so intimidated by this incredible poetry that we won't want to read. So if you do want to read, there's a reactions button down at the bottom, and above it, it says raise hand. So I see some of you have found your raise hands, and I will just go through. There are 80 people here tonight, so I hope you're all awake. This is so exciting. The first person on my screen, and keep raising your hand, everybody. This will be wonderful. The first person on my screen is Pam Hepper. Pam, I'd love to hear you read.
One or two? One poem?
Let's just keep it to one tonight
Right.
because there are 80 people here. I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly. I was thinking that too.
And I'd like to invite Paulann and Andrea to do an encore at any moment if they'd like to participate in the open mic as well. You might hear something that triggers a response from you. Welcome, Pam Hepper.
Thank you. Yeah, I just started in a writing group called the Creative Coven. Most of these people are women singer-songwriters, but anyway, they meet every morning. It's incredible. I've really been enjoying this. This is called The Way We Read the Signs. Is it in the way the soles of my feet knead the 3-day-old mud? Places in my feet I rarely notice. Suddenly experience connection to the earth, her malleability, her coolness, her cradling. No wonder we call her mother. Sometimes I suddenly become aware of a raindrop on my cheek, signaling the onset of a potential shower, cleansing my body and soul, slaking an unknown thirst, a gift to all living things. Then, sometimes a subtle wisp of hair moving out of place, or a quivering leaf signals the breath of Mother Nature coming to touch me inside and out, trading my CO2 for that most needed oxygen coming from the plants. We are so connected. Then, a sneaky ray of sunshine surprisingly hits my eyes and warms my face and exposed skin, reminding me how much we depend on that energy from outer space and the glorious green chlorophyll that makes my animated animal life possible. Feeling lucky and grateful for all the gifts that make me possible, and the moments like this when I realize we are all present here and now and forever.
Thank you so much, Pam. Welcome, Sherry Levine. This is all up to you, Sherry. You've done a wonderful job on wrangling those two great poets. Thank you.
Well, it was a dynamic duo, as I said. Andrea and Paulann, thank you so much. That was so wonderful. And I wasn't going to read, but Paulann talked about her moth poem. So I have a moth poem, Reckoning, for Dan. He struggles to speak, to move his body, to open his eyes, like a moth struggling to escape its own casing, its wings weakened, its body collapsing into itself. This reckoning, an unrising, it will never fly. I cannot pry open the cocoon with a pin. How can I help his rumbling, the lowest part of low, the wrestling of emotions? But he is not a moth. He is a man. And how will he escape to freedom when he resists my touch on his arm, a kiss on his forehead? When I bend down to cradle his head, he punches the air with his one good fist and growls. Thank you.
Oh, I'm muted. Peter, it's your turn.
Oh, thank you, Dale. It's so great to be here. And thank you again to Paulann and Andrea for just wonderful, evocative readings. The image behind me is the building I grew up in Brooklyn, which kind of fits because I'm going to read a story, read a poem about, when I was a lot younger. It's called For Olivia, Wherever You Are. Olivia, if only I could hold your nicotine-stained hand one more time while we sneak cigarettes behind that boathouse on the Navasink River. We promised to make out only as practice for future boyfriends and girlfriends, afraid to go too far past second base without birth control. Trembling from fear of our futures and desire for flesh. Exchange smoky kisses, keeping clothes on while we explored body parts, rubbing rough and fast over shorts and skirts, waded through the river to hide embarrassing stains. What shame made us fear feelings, hide them from friends, family who surely knew. If I could whisper into that teenage ear today, I'd say, wring every last drop of joy from that rag of life. Wrote each other that fall for a while. She sent love notes on pink paper, scented with perfume and tobacco smoke. I can't remember when or why we stopped writing. It's like trying to remember falling asleep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Peter. Next up is Liz Nakazawa. Hi, Liz.
Hello. Thank you, Paulann, and thank you, Andrea. Wonderful. This poem's called The Face in the Sea. A town that lets the dead stay where they are and agrees that the heart is simple. It starts to tick and then it stops. A town full of folks like the fishermen, one fisherman with a daughter, and the daughter remembered out in the waves. A face in the sea, she said, out in the waves, floating on the water, that water over fish, fish over algae, algae over flagellum, flagellum beside Hermesenda, the face in the storytelling sea with veils of foam. This town has few painters, and one wanted to paint that face in the sea, but the daughter objected to mimicry. And so she said, let the face stay, floating, philosophizing, bobbing back and forth like a maritime metronome, quivering sometimes with pleasure, alternating the novel and the familiar, the melancholy and the blissful, patient in an arpeggio of waves, beckoning towards the silent movie score, the shore. The face watching over the town full of fishermen, the town which understands, agreeing about hearts, harbors, ticking, nets, and seas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Next, I'd like to introduce Ellen Hansen. Ellen, welcome.
Thank you, Dale. Wonderful reading, Paulann and Andrea. Just really enjoyed it. This is called Hope and Healing, and it's after Ellen Bass. No is a puny pencil stub of a word, starting with two stakes in the ground, connected with a crosswise post. There is no motion, no leeway, no opening to connect with others, just stuck on itself. Yes, while only a letter longer, opens its arms wide, reaching up and out. It embraces wide open possibilities, welcoming the vast and boundless nature of sky, of self, of others. Me is self-contained, focusing down and in with limits preordained. We is open-ended, facing up and out, allowing growth and change. Hope and healing have a chance when we say yes and give ourselves over to be here, now, fully present. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. So wonderful to hear your voice.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Paul Sutter, or Suter. I don't know how to pronounce your name, Paul.
Suitor. Yeah, but excuse me, just a second. Where am I here? Come on. Thought it was muted. Okay. Thank you, Dale. This poem requires a bit of background. I wrote it 3 days ago on the first anniversary of my son's marriage to a wonderful woman. My son has never been married before, had a long-term relationship that didn't work out. And these two people have found each other at this time in their late 30s and early 40s. And it's called, just straightforward, a first anniversary poem for Nath and Hava. They walk with each other, hand in hand, cool evening breezes that comfort after a hot afternoon. They talk with each other, voice gift wrapped in voice, a gliding purple-blue creek framed by anemone, vine maple, and oak. They share each other's pains, They share each other's pains. A mother tree and its offspring sending and receiving aid. They parent for the future and the greater good, the earth's warnings and messages, guiding all of us toward peace and justice. They step to worlds of dance, indigenous, ballet, modern, folklorico, celebrating people, song, challenge, righteous endings. They choose trails together, long distance hikers tracing the route from springs to creeks to lakes. They companion each other, living out the word's origins, compagnon, quote, one who breaks bread with another, unquote.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to call on Carol Boutard right now because it's 11:30 for her. Carol, would you like to read?
I will. Thank you, Dale. You're very kind, and this has been an incredible evening to hear two people read tonight. It was just packed. It was just extraordinary. So, thank you to Paulann and Andrea. It was just absolutely amazing. So, one short poem. Ashmead's Kernel. Leave it on the counter for a week, though 4 would be better. It isn't going to rot. You were looking for something deeper than crunch. Wait. Wait till you feel the give and wrinkling of your grandmother's arms. She would have known an apple like this, its modest russet and rough imperfections, its taut heft growing easeful as its tang concentrates. Roll it across your face, lick it, press it to your nose and catch the bright aroma rising in the heat of your grip. Explore the stem's deep enfolding and soft invitation. Since when has anything this fine touched your lips? Someone else's hand circled this fruit before plucking it from the tree. Imagine when they thought, yes, this one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carol. David Goodrum, do you want to go next?
Well, thank you very much. And yes, what a wonderful evening with Andrea and Paulann, our headliners, but a lot of also wonderful poetry being read on open mic as well. And what were there, 80 people here at one time? That's amazing. This poem was published in the Louisville Review a good while back. It's called My Brother Jumped from the Fire. In the next room, 26 died. A half dozen groped the walls of a walk-in closet, cul-de-sac, short hallway of panic. Another group piled up by the locked exit, searching for air pockets, tugging at the ties wrapped around their necks. But my brother knew he had to pick up the cleaning, felt for the stub in his coat pocket, knew he had to drive his daughter to flute practice, then to her candy striper meeting, then buy some groceries. He knew this weekend the garden had to be started, that he'd lead the singing in church on Sunday. In this room, they hurled a conference table at the window. It bounced back into their chests, stealing the breath from them. They heaved the table again, and my brother saw the slugs in the tilled ground waiting, could see the price on the canned corn, which brand, if he could only focus on the label, but the table came crashing back. When they tried again, he had to fight the urge to sit down and think it all over, while pulling the loose threads from his suit coat, smoothing the frayed cuffs of his trousers. He wanted to refold his handkerchief after wiping off his shoes, matching the creases he had ironed in. Instead, he coaxed the rough cartilage of his Achilles tendon, checked for his blood type. During this 3-story flight, the New England sky never looked so expansive. This motel never looked so tall. On the way down, he noticed the 3rd floor curtains needed cleaning and the sheets were torn. The 2nd floor rooms were being remodeled. The wallpaper had been stripped off. He could almost smell the streaks and shadows of warming glue. When he passed the restaurant, he wondered if maybe no one liked the food. So much of it was left on the tables. I saw him that same day on the national news, flat on his back, guardrails on his bed. They told me later it was my brother. To me, he was some man interviewed after a fire, and I barely paid attention to what he was saying. I concentrated on the point where his dark beard and his collar brace met, where his Adam's apple would be. And I was mesmerized by the watch still on his wrist, the watch that had fascinated me when I was a boy, because it was new and self-winding. Thank you.
Wow.
What a story,
Nice.
for sure. Sue Lick, would you like to read next?
Sure. David just blew me away. Whew. Wow. So many great poems, and Paulann and Andrea. Oh my God, you're still my heroes. Okay, this is called Unarmed. The choir director's son, age 31, lies unconscious, breathing through a tube hooked to a machine, hope fading as we hold hands at church and pray, pleading to God for one more healing miracle. Yes, he sinned, but he's still one of yours. On Facebook, my nephew posts photos, 3 little kids playing at Papa's house, learning the Spanish days of the week in their bathing suits, dancing by the pool, jousting with styrofoam noodle swords. The man in the ICU has 2 siblings too, sister in Europe, brother about to become a dad. This freckle-faced, red-haired one sang soprano, standing next to me as he grew into a baritone. He hugged with a force that stuck to your bones. Here on a Facebook video, the little ones shout, lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, sábado, dancing in their bathing suits, waving their swords. Oh, let those swords be strong enough to keep the invisible demons at bay. Por favor, señor. The father in a wheelchair, the mother not so well, jobless, living on air, sit by the bed and watch their oldest, whom they warned about the curse. They thought he beat it once, but it turned on him, and they couldn't hold him tight enough. As the pines blacken against the darkening sky, 8-winged bugs like little Tinkerbells zip through the glare of the streetlight, while I sit here alone, wishing my arms were long enough to hold them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Judith Montgomery, would you like to read?
What happened to Kathleen?
I would. I also have my computer saying low bandwidth. So first I'm going to thank Andrea and Paulann for their gorgeous language and stories and their poems. And then I'm going to read a very short poem, hoping that I won't freeze while I'm talking to you. So here it is, Waiting for Orioles. At dawn, beneath a cocked umbrella, hands cupped on my milk-steamed mug, I lean into the yeasty rise of Baja sun, swelling through blue Baja air. Above, among the treelets of green leaves frothing the African tulip tree, this pair of hooded orioles sweeps, their dazzle apricot of breast and belly flashing from the shade of darker wings and tails through scarlet ruffled blooms, through the reach of branch and curving trunk, the naked bark buffed in bird-stirred air. Such wing shine. Heat sleeks each feather as this oriole, then her mate, dimples in the lemon yellow trumpet vine, its cornucopias of nectar. The fleet pair preen their right by speed and beauty to the air, to every honey drop. Oh, love, you've been gone too long. Thank you.
I love that ending. It's beautiful. Jade, would you like to read?
Yes, what a wonderful evening of poetry. Sorry, it's just turning my camera on. Thank you so much, Andrea and Paulann. Stunning, rich, magnificent, beautiful poetry. This is a poem I wrote when I was on a poetry residency in Southern California, and I wasn't that familiar with all the creatures and insects, etc., that inhabit that part of the world. This is called Shadow, Part 1. It was a strange day, full moon eclipse, astrologically speaking. I could tell this weekend was going to be the kind of event that sorted the women from the girls. I was somewhat prepared. You came in the middle of the night, setting up house on the black and white cushion on the seat of that old rocking chair. The chair that rocked empty in the Santa Ana winds, always inhabited by invisible guests, even when it was rocking hard. The spirit whisper must have warned me. I nearly didn't see you. So close to landing on your shiny carapace, just noticing you in time, so deeply black and determined, to stay there and build your home, to lay your eggs and watch the birth. 200 babies windblown. A dark feeling when I had to act, removing you from that chair. You burrowed in deep, wouldn't go, wouldn't budge, as the moon shut down her light. I took your picture and looked you up, never having seen you before. Black Widow is your name, your bite, really something. I tried to warn, cajole, and plead, entrapped with you through the night. Darkness of death hiding the light, a showdown at noon, returning you to spirit air. Were you a gift, a warning, my guardian, a test? 24 full moon hours I mourned, ghost tunnel thread covering your shell. I am nearly unraveling with your untimely death. Am I a widow already? My dark self revealed, eclipsed no longer. Dare I allow your black in? 2. The rocking chair is rocking all by itself out there on the porch, as though you were just taking in the view. The black and white striped cushion is dented where you used to sit. I have to let you go now. Tell the wind to still the air.
Lovely, Jade. Thank you. Claire Gardner, would you like to read? Carter. Claire Carter. Sorry.
Thank you. Sure, I have a poem. It's a little different. I wrote this, it's the most recent poem I've written, and I wrote it when I was on a retreat in Eastern Oregon to a writing prompt. And the writing prompt was write a natural history of anything. So this is my take. A natural history of my fingernails. Hands, one of 4 physical polarities of doing, farthest from the body core and maybe farthest from the neural command center. Hands, prehensile, pentadigital, they wave, clench, pound, spread. At the ends of each digital extension, the tips armored with thick carotenoid spatulate shields, we find our fingernails. They are the scratch that replies to an itch. They scrape away dried goo to see what lies below. They can be inserted into a screw top, standard or Phillips, and sometimes precludes the need to find a screwdriver, saving incalculable moments of time. Fingernails can protect the tender fingertips from the trauma of being slammed in a car door or shut in the crack of a closing drawer. Fingernails can make a strong fashion statement, colored, lacquered, sprinkled with glitter of many landscapes to distract when the boss at work is making another nonsensical motivational speech. Left to grow long and longer, they have been a statement of privilege and wealth. My fingernails are slightly ribbed and thick. They are seldom colored. The cuticles are frequently ragged from the dryness of handwork. They develop hangnails that I try to bite off, frequently, usually with no success. My fingernails are not brittle. They seldom break and continuously grow, requiring regular clipping. Filing cannot keep them short enough. I look at my fingernails, and at the end of a day of gardening or lawn work, I sigh and always remember my mother's admonishment after an afternoon digging in the dirt with my little brother. Ballerinas never have dirty fingernails. So thank you so much.
So much, Claire. I found myself checking my fingernails to see if they were clean. They were fine. I don't know your name. You have a white beard and white hair and are wearing glasses with, there you are. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Can you hear me okay? My name is Barry Green. And I like to write a poem that I wrote just a few days ago, inspired by my 2-year-old miniature Labradoodle named Ollie. And the poem is entitled Ollie's Poem. When I stand at the biffy, my dog watches intently until the stream starts. Then he tears off as if alarmed or excited. Dogs mark their passage and claim their realm by peeing on trees, bushes, posts, or fences. I guess he's startled at how little territory I own, or happy that the rest of the place is his. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Janice Rubin, would you like to read?
Sure. So thanks, Andrea and Paulann, for a wonderful reading tonight. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to read a poem entitled Lentil Soup. I became a much better cook over the last 2 years, and this was my fallback recipe. Lentil soup. When I make my special lentil soup, the scent of garlic flows throughout the house, steam rising. The hearty soup cooked to perfection, lentils savory in a bowl from Greece or Saudi Arabia. Best of all, the vegetables, carrots, celery, onions, complement each other, sauteed in butter, garlic, and black pepper. A thick piece of crusty bread sliced with a knife, a wedge of sharp cheddar, all swallowed down with a glass of cold white wine. In a short while, I'll go up to bed, fall into the down comforter, beneath flannel sheets, satisfied. Contentment arrives in the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And now I'm hungry. Stan, would you like to read? You need to unmute.
Yes. This past weekend was New Year's in the Hebrew calendar. And now there's a period where we're supposed to make up with people that we've offended or have offended us. This poem is called The Tide and the Rising Moon. The recipe for forgiving. So few ingredients. Easy to list, impossible to find in a cold heart. A forgiving heart, forever open, stocked with love, remorse, surrender, carried along like gentle waves, washing back along the shore.
Thank you, Stan. Vivian, would you like to read?
I would. Thank you so much, Dale and Sherry, for organizing and keeping this wonderful series going. And thank you to our incredible poets, Andrea and Paulann. What a beautiful reading this evening. I'm going to share with you a poem called Lost Song, which is just published in Willowa. And Willowa doesn't do readings, so I thought I would share it with you today. Lost Song is after Carolyn Forché's Lost Poem. I'm searching for a song I heard years ago. I can't recall the title, but there's a wagon in the song, and a market, and a white dove, or maybe a swallow. We sang the song, sitting shoulder to shoulder on the school bus to summer camp, or to tour a Coca-Cola factory, or to sports events where we mostly lost the game or the race, or to matinees downtown to see A Midsummer Night's Dream. We would harmonize our voices to drown out the shouts and laughter of the boys throwing dice and taking nips from mini bar bottles and ducking behind seat backs to puff on cigarette butts. In the song, the wind laughed. There was an ox and a farmer, and our voices swelled full-throated, a frisson of danger down our spines as we imagined how, if we were threatened, we would fight back, or at least fly away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivian. I think Willowa should do a reading, actually. Oh. Kathleen, would you like to read?
Yes. Not long after my 10th birthday, my family moved to the tiny town in Southern Oregon called Chiloquin. We only lived there for 14 months, but it was a pivotal year for me. And I've titled this poem Klamath Reservation, 1957. Are there still graves in the cemetery strewn with trade beads? We eagerly gathered them up, oblivious to the desecration. Do young boys and girls still dress in feathers and deerskin to dance at powwows? And do they still sleep in cars outside the taverns? Do people use the dictionary of the Klamath language compiled one summer by a visiting linguist? It gave me my campfire girl's Indian name, Lulwedgus, interpreter. Do the train engineers still wave to kids as they drive their freight trains through town? They didn't care that we lived on the wrong side of the tracks. Does the hardware store still sell night crawlers? We caught them in the dark and made money for candy bars and comic books. Is the public library still just one small room? I copied a whole book about the Aztecs before I had to take it back.
Do fifth graders still play tetherball at recess and make relief maps of Latin America? I also read stories of children sent to internment camps during World War II. Do well-traveled people still come to work as public health nurses and mission church ministers? I tried to imagine living in Ethiopia or Honduras. What if I could return to the place where I discovered the world?
Thank you, Kathleen. I'd like to ask the other Kathleen to read. I don't think she's read yet. Her name is Kathleen iPad.
Yes. Thank you. Kathleen Culligan.
Thank you, Kathleen.
I'd like to read a poem called Delivery. The ewe lies in a corner of the pen, her legs tucked close to her large belly. She sees me and struggles to her feet. She has labored since early evening, and now it's midnight. I slip my hand inside of her to learn what's keeping things. A nose, a forehead right side up, 2 hooves beneath a tiny jaw, everything just as it should be. I see the nose with each contraction now. Patience, I remind myself. Suffolks are a hardy breed and she has lambed before, but I am getting cold. I go back in, hook 2 fingers behind the hidden ears and gently tug. She strains against the bulk. My knuckles bruise as head and legs slide past the pubic bone and out, and then the rest of it. I lay the slippery newborn on the straw. Its body steams. Across the black pelt, bloody flecks are scattered like the stars. The mother's rough gray tongue washes it to wakefulness. It finds its voice, its knees, its feet, and totters to her side. I guide the hungry mouth, then look for fresh, dry straw to wipe my hands. It's time to go in. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was an adventure for sure. Gabriel, would you like to read?
Hi, thank you very much. And thanks to Paulann for inviting me to what feels like a poetry speakeasy. Thanks for the secret knock. This is a prose poem I've just written, and it has what Paulann called a hard at work title. I like that description. I left in such a rush for my new life that I left my father's books behind, hand pressed quartos and octavos, Everyman's and Modern Library editions from the 1920s, Melville, Austen, Dickens. He would buy these on his lunch hour from Cameron's for a nickel or a dime. Bus fare he had pocketed by walking to work, priced by hand in grease pencil on a flyleaf sticker. Rubber cement shadows where they had hung. Single volumes from broken sets too, The Tempest, Two Gentlemen of Verona, small enough to fit in the pocket of his Harris tweed. All these followed him home like stray dogs. They are still there where I arranged them, on top of the upright and the mantle, on the shelves framing the fireplace, dozens. I've asked for them back, but she holds on to things. An old friend had warned me, husbands who leave feel guilty. They give away the farm. The old house, it didn't matter to me. It needed a new roof, new pipes, new husband, but the books, that was my mistake. Thank you.
What we leave behind in the moment of love. I'd like to ask Robert Kirschenbaum.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me? Hi. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. I'm a longtime friend of Andrea's, and she just emailed me today to let me know about this. So I'm glad to be with you guys. And what's interesting is just about a week or so ago, I was looking through an old book and I opened up and there was a page of a poem that I had written so long ago, I had completely forgotten about. So I'd like to share that with you. It's a very short poem. It's called Mystery. Ancient wild flora, lushly greens, moist rocky walls. The deep and narrow ravine, like a lost holy relic, accepts only filtered light, almost translucent, ethereal. Brook babble, sigh of breeze, stillness so languid, eternity hangs like wild honey between each throb of my heart. Ripples lasp into unity, my very blood, the dewdrops falling from a maidenhair frond into the crystalline musical waters of my premortal self. Later, on the highway, I smell exhaust. Dazed by red flashing lights, I wonder if I had really become part of the mystery.
Thank you, Robert. I'm glad you opened the book to that page.
Me too.
Forshay Pelham, would you like to read?
Hi, yeah, I'd like to read. Hi. My voice is kind of like going away, so I'm sorry if it sounds really raspy. First, I'd like to thank Andrea for inviting me. I'm really ecstatic and I'm really happy I got to hear everybody's open. And thank you, Paulann, for reading. I'm just like really excited. I'm trying to hold it in. Okay, so I'm reading a poem from 2018 that I wrote as a freshman in college, and it's when me and my partner met, and it's called Expectation. There weren't any set, yet none given. The motions of the past are no longer within. The test of time are at a halt. It is when you look at me, my heart starts to jolt. It starts to beat, jump, and tumble. The butterflies in my stomach start to rumble. They twist and turn, telling my secrets. Through my eyes, I know you can see it. I have so many poems that I'm ready to tell you, what my mind and my body wouldn't show. But someday you will fully know. Expectations, not set, untimely, without limitations.
Wonderful sentiment. Thank you, Forshay.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to be presumptuous and read a poem myself. And I wrote it yesterday, and my mom said it was okay, so it hasn't gone through the grist mill yet. Her first flight. Oh, and I've been doing a lot of babysitting, a lot of babysitting. Her first flight. The fledgling child splays her arms wide as they will go, straight out from the shoulders, scapula blades in full flight mode. Dainty fingers trail air currents from primary tips to tertials. Alive in flight, she swans the side yard, hanging on to a ragged scrap of wind. This is what she was born to do, following an arc of transformation, fearless. She takes a bold leap, into autumn's sharp, cool air. Foregoing gravity's pull, Colleen sucks life into her greedy gape, lifting from my warm embrace. Thank you. Thank you again, Andrea and Paulann. What incredible poetry. Can't wait to get your books, your new books. And thank you everybody for reading. And what a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Dale. You did an amazing job.
Thanks, Dale.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Paulann.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Dale.
Andrea, Paulann, and Dale, and Sherry. Thank you very much for making this happen. It's a lovely evening. Thank you.
Good night.